Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice, and we hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Dr. Amanda Adkins. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Absolutely. Dr. Amanda Adkins is a double board certified internal medicine and lifestyle medicine physician. She's also the health strategist and owner of Enlightenment Health and Wealth. She has a deep passion for ensuring that everyone has a chance at a happy and healthy life. Her most recent focus has been to help women who are overweight to prevent and, whenever possible, to reverse chronic illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. Both through her medical and her personal experience, she knows how lifestyle can lead to remarkable changes in our health and in our ability to fulfill God's will for our lives. So I am so glad you are here with us today, and I would love to start by asking you, share with us, how did you get interested in this intersection of lifestyle and health and biblical principles?
Yes. So I tell people all the time, this is a story that unravels over decades. Okay. So I'm going to try to do the short version of it. But it started back when I myself was a teenager in high school. In the early 90s, I was an overweight teenager. We had to do what they call the presidential physical fitness test. And at that time, they made us actually weigh ourselves. And, you can look in the mirror, see that you're overweight. But at that time, I weighed 199 pounds as like a 13, 14-year-old girl. And I was like, okay, I know that in my family is heart disease, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure. And I was like, I did not want that to be my story. And I had already decided I wanted to become a doctor, interested in the heart. So I love, heart disease and diabetes and high blood pressure. And I was like, okay, so what can I do to actually help myself so I do not become one of the statistics of my family and my family history? So I just started exercising, and I was like, I didn't know what else to do. Like I said, 13, 14 years old in Indiana. And I was like, okay, I can do that to try to lose weight because I'm more of a book nerd. I like to just read in the corner. And then at the age of 16, I became a vegetarian. And this is funny because my father was a meat delivery truck driver at the time. So in our family was, in our household was just like hot dogs, bologna, sausage, bacon, because they would get that for cheap or nothing. And so I was saying, I'm not going to eat those foods anymore. I did not know that those would lead to, the illnesses that we're going to talk about today. But it was just like, I want to try to lose weight more that I can help myself. And my father is also a minister. So I've always grown up in the church, really looking at how, our physical health impacts our spiritual health. And I remember my pastor at the time, would always call me doctor since he knew I wanted to become a doctor. And he actually passed away when I was a senior in high school. So he did not get to see me become an actual physician. But it wasn't until I believe a couple of years ago that I realized he was in his 40s when he passed away from complications from diabetes. And, when you're a teenager, everybody seems old to you. So it was amazing to me to actually know that he actually passed away from that. And I was just like, oh, wow, to see this come full circle, because I was actually trying to prevent those things in myself. And I can't actually deviate or delineate, what the time frame of me knowing that the biblical principles would come into play, because the Bible was always a part of me. And I just say that that's just how, we so that everything works out for the good. And how my story was unfolding to actually be able to carry out this mission that God has for my life, and just to intertwine all that together. I came upon lifestyle medicine just by happenstance. Like, I was trying to continuously improve my health. And then my patients started asking me, what else can I do besides medication? Right. And I was like, I don't know. We were taught in medical school to diagnose and give you medication. I just know what I do. And this was back when I started practicing in 2009. And I believe
Mm,
lifestyle medicine was not a board certification until like 2014 or something like that. So it wasn't even in existence as of yet. But again, I was just trying to figure out what else could I do? What else could I do to help patients and myself?
mm,
And just Googling different things, I actually found lifestyle medicine later,
mm.
which is again how everything comes together, because no one I knew was in lifestyle medicine. They did like functional medicine and homeopathic medicine, and I looked at those initially, and I was like, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. And then when I saw lifestyle medicine, I'm like, hey, that's what I've been looking for my entire life, but it just hadn't been, available, more widespread as of yet. And just when I saw that, I was like, I have to do this. Like, even though I've already went through school and everything, I'm just like, I just want to learn this and help as many people as I can, including myself, to just continue on in health and wellness. And like I said, it's a long story over decades, so it just kind of all intertwines there.
I love that though. That's so interesting how some of your personal experiences with health kind of got you started. And then you just kept looking and looking until you actually came across the new kind of relatively new field of lifestyle medicine. That's a term that maybe still a lot of people don't really understand. And I believe like there's certain core ideas in the definition of lifestyle medicine, like you're board certified in it. If someone wants to practice lifestyle medicine, there are these principles that are kind of at the core. You want to share with us what those are?
Yes, so it's the six pillars that we call them pillars of lifestyle medicine, and they are plant predominant nutrition, movement, exercise, sleep, restorative sleep, stress management, social connection, and getting rid of toxic substances like tobacco use and alcohol use.
Mm.
So if we look at all those things, that's what our lifestyle is made up of, all those things that impact our health.
Oh, that is so good. And as you've kind of moved into that area, learned more about it, started using it more in your practice, tell me about how you connect, for example, the whole food, plant predominant eating pattern with biblical principles. Like, where do you see that? And how do you share that with people?
Yes, so it's very interesting that people don't realize like how much the Bible actually relates to our physical health.
Mm,
So I always tell people for plant-based nutrition, I mostly point to people with the Daniel fast. So most of the time, especially if you're in the church, you've done the Daniel fast. You're like, okay, I may do it for 21 days or during Lent season. And I always remind people of that story. First of all, then I said, well, there's nowhere in the book of Daniel where he talks about going back to eating like he was before, or if he started eating the king's food once he became, high in command in the office. But yet we still do that. We go back to what we were eating before. And people are like, does it really say that? And I really think that they go and then read the book of Daniel to see if it says it in there that he went back to eating those foods. And it's not in there. But then there was a verse that actually I came upon recently from a church service that I attended. And it's in the book of Genesis. And it talks about how we should eat, or when we were actually made, when human beings were made, how we were to eat every fruit that was seed bearing.
yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, that was the original plan. So when we look at that, and most people think, well, we can eat anything we want. It's not sinful to eat foods. And I was like, it is not. It is not. But if you look at the original plan of what God had for human beings, what we were supposed to eat, it was like in the Garden of Eden, you eat the garden foods, right?
Mm,
And then to see how Daniel and his friends actually were able to be very wise, their physical stature was better than anyone else. I'm just like, what other proof do you need, that you're supposed to have these foods? And then if we think about how later foods are actually impacting our health, and we're getting away from those actual principles of how much worse our health is now
mm,
than it has been in previous centuries. So
I love that. And I love how you brought in the story of Daniel. For those of us for those that may be listening today and aren't exactly sure, maybe you have heard of the Daniel fast, you're not sure what it is. I just want to remind you that if you just turn in the Bible to chapters 1 of Daniel's, it will talk about how these young men, when they were taken captive to Babylon and were offered all the rich, sweet, full of meat, full of alcohol, a diet that the king had on his table, they said, no, we don't want to do that. And they ask instead to eat a completely plant-based diet. They ask for pulse, that's things like beans and greens and those sorts of things, and just water, not other kinds of alcoholic beverages. And when they were tested in comparison to all the other young people that were in the same cohort with them, but had made a different decision around their food, they were 10 times wiser and they were healthier, like they looked good. In fact, it's so interesting that some years ago, the New England Journal of Medicine had an editorial, and they referred to the story of Daniel as the first lifestyle medicine study that was ever conducted, right?
That's interesting. I have to go to that and find that. So I'm going to have to use that. Yes, I love it.
Yes, I love how they put it together. They were like, this is our first recorded research on plant-based lifestyle. And, I think it does go back even before, like you said, right back to the Garden of Eden. And God, who created our bodies, also knew what was the best fuel. And it was interesting that part of that fuel did not include animal products in the Garden of Eden. So I love how that ties in so well with what we're seeing in science today and the things that help us to prevent and reverse chronic diseases like diabetes, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, all of those. But that's one of the pillars. Let's also talk just a little bit about physical activity. Tell us about why this is so important and where do we see this biblical principle?
So we were meant to move. We were meant to work. Our human beings are not meant to sit. So we know sitting is now the new smoking. So we were to actually tend to the Garden of Eden. We were actually to work the garden. But I actually look at just overall that there's in the Bible where it talks about we should enjoy good health and have the wealth, the good health and the wealth to enjoy it. So that's where enlightenment, health, and wealth comes from too, just to throw that in there. But then we also talk about how our body is a temple. And I use that in all aspects of the pillars also, that we can actually look at if we're not moving our body like it's meant to move, then we're not actually using our body as a temple. Also in First Timothy, it talks about how we should use our body, and physical training is of good value. It goes on to tell that spiritual training is more valuable, but it actually had the point to make that physical training is of value to the body also. So I have people look at that. So we need to actually be aware of, our movement for our body, because it is the temple of God. We need to be moving around. We need to actually be in good health to enjoy our wealth that God has placed upon us and to actually carry out the will that he has for our lives. So we need the nutrition, and then we need the exercise too. So those are two ways so far to introduce our God-given purpose for our lives through health.
I really love that. It reminds me of the verse in Isaiah where it talks about walking and not getting tired and flying on wings like eagles. There's a lot of imagery in the Bible that is very active. And so, I think there is a lot that we can pull in terms of principles of lifestyle from so many areas in the Bible. And so I appreciate you bringing those things out. Now, what about the pillar of stress management?
Yes. I want to go back to the physical exercise too. One thing I forgot to mention, because Paul talks about this a lot in all his books, where we are to train like athletes. So if you think about, especially since the Olympics was just here and the Paralympics is coming, how disciplined they are in their physical body. So if you compare that to how disciplined you have to be in your physical body and your spiritual body to be good also. So just all the books that Paul wrote, almost every single one, he relates to physical training. Stress management. So I just wanted to throw that in there too.
Oh, that's
the stress management. It is 1 Peter 5:7, which is so deep. Cast your cares upon the Lord. So most of the time when we are stressed, we're trying to carry everything for ourselves. and we are not actually using our great Lord and our provider to actually carry the weight for us to be able to decrease that stress that we have on our body. And the other verse, or the other scripture that I really love, because I really like to hone in, is just the whole Psalm 23 of how the Lord is our shepherd, we shall not want. He makes us to lie down in green pasture. So all that, if you just read that and actually meditate on that, walk with that, then your stress level will come down. So I really like to emphasize to people that meditating on the word. So any of the words, any of the promises in the Bible that God actually promises for us will actually help reduce our stress. Even though these two that I pull out specifically that I actually use to actually decrease my stress. And just like I said, just walking and talking with the Lord and let him know what is going on for you. Because if you actually tell him what's going on, he will actually help reduce your stress level.
So true, so true. Reminds me of one of my favorites. It says, "Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he
Yes.
trusteth in thee." And it's like when we can trust in a God that cares about us and loves us so deeply, that just completely takes away any need to stress and be anxious, because we can have that trust that he's going to walk with us through whatever we have to face. It doesn't mean that everything is all roses, right?
Right.
Sometimes we have hard days and hard things that we have to deal with. But just remembering that, just like he blessed Daniel and his three friends when they made good choices, one of the ways he did that was he walked through the fiery furnace with them.
Yes.
And, you know, and I think we need to remember that sometimes we all go through our own furnaces of affliction, hard things, and yet we can trust in a God that will go through it with us and day by day give us what we need to survive and to not just survive, but actually thrive even in difficult times.
Exactly. Yes.
So, oh, I love that. Anything else you wanted to share around extra stress management? I mean, before we go into positive social connections.
Yeah, so there's so many things with like stress because I'm just thinking like one that got me through medical school that I had like all over my um uh apartment was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. You know, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, and all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. Because medical school is hard. You talk about stress. But like just those verses, and I just want people to know that you can take any verse that speaks to you and just recite that, like I said, again and over, because it does wonders for you. Another one is Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans of good and not of evil, plans to bring you to an expected end, to have hope in a future. So just to know those things and be able to recite those to yourself, that's going to decrease your stress. And like I said, all these things just kind of intertwined. And like I said, because I just grew up with this, and the more that I know the Lord and the more I walk with him, the more verses that come, and it just comes out, and people are like, oh, I never really thought about that. So I'm just like overly excited to come and speak to this with you today, because I never get to really fully bring this out all the time when I'm speaking about the physical body. But this is like what we need. Like I said, it just hurt my heart for when my pastor passed away at such a young age, that if we just actually use these biblical principles to get our good health going.
So good, so good. And yes, I taught stress management for a year last year with a church group. And it was so powerful to see what a difference it can make, like you said, to really draw upon the promises that God has in the Bible for us and memorize them so we can bring them to our mind when we need them. Don't always have our Bible right next to us, but if it's in our mind, we get to carry it with us. And
Yes.
it's so powerful in really decreasing our anxiety, which is often about fear, right?
Exactly.
Fear of the unknown
I
often.
know.
Uh, and it can create such havoc in our lives. And we don't need that. In
Right.
fact, some people say, well, what does this have to do with diabetes? Well, my family
Everything.
has a lot of diabetics in it. So I've had a chance to watch what happens up close and personal. And somebody that I know well shared how they actually checked their blood sugar and it was a very good normal number. Then they got a stressful phone call from a boss. And by the end of that phone call, their blood sugar was 400 and they hadn't eaten it.
Mhm.
And,
Yes.
a lot of people are surprised at the impact that stress can directly have on your blood
Hmm.
sugar numbers. Not just like pushes inflammation and all of these other things, but it actually directly
Yes.
affects things like your blood sugar. And if we understood that, we might pay more attention, right? To, well, how are we feeling, and or how are we dealing with our stress? Because that is such a
Right.
one, especially I think since 2020 going forward, people have really had to deal with so much more stress and anxiety than they did before in so many
Yes.
aspects of life, that's been a huge thing that
Very
many
hard.
people are still dealing with. So fourth pillar, positive social connections. How does that help us with our metabolism?
So, I mean, with that, if we look at the scriptures and we know that we need that connection with others, because again, I start back to the Garden of Eden where God said man should not be alone. And therefore, here comes Eve for Adam. So, just right there, again, if we start, we should know that we should be together, right? There's also verses that mention how we are all one body in Christ and that we should not neglect the other. So it mentions how the eye should not say to the hand, you are not useful, because if we could not see how much that would impact us. And for diabetes, that's very important with our eye health. If we don't have our hands to actually be able to use those to actually feed ourselves to good food, those things like of that nature. So we need that. And also it mentions in the Bible where two are, when they're actually together, that two are better than one. For if one falls, then it can help the other one up. Because if you're by yourself, you won't necessarily be able to help yourself up.
Mm.
So all those things, again, there's many more verses, but those are really ones that we actually talk about where two people are needed to actually carry out what they need for their actual God-given purpose. And then, of course, how it would relate to diabetes. If you're by yourself, like again, if something were to happen, your blood sugars were to drop too low or too high, and you actually fall out, like it says, you fall down, and then there's no one there to help you. It's always good to have that connection. And then just for our mental health too, I always like to put that in for any chronic illness that we have. The mental health is very important, and we need that connection with other people to actually just feel the love from God, love each other as yourself, that you should be able to carry out that love and be able to actually show your love to others and, just feel like a human being. Like I said, because if we didn't have, the Eve to our Adam, and everyone else in nature had their partner, you would definitely feel alone, and God did not want that for a person that was made in his own image.
Mm. I do believe we were created for community, weren't we?
Mhm.
And it was interesting. I found this fascinating study on diabetics where it showed that if they had a strong social support system, that their risk of all cause mortality dropped by 50%. With all,
Yeah,
factoring in all of the other things, all other things being equal, just those social connections cut their risk of dying in half.
that
And
is
so, like, we
amazing.
cannot ignore that. And we live in a society where so many relationships are broken, dysfunctional, not healthy, that we need to be intentional about
Yes,
finding community, right? Being with people that can support us, that will listen to us, that care about us, because we can't always find it in our families of origin. I think when
exactly.
we can, we're so blessed, but we all can be intentional. Like the Bible says, if a man would have friends, he must show himself friendly. And
Yes.
so we have control over our ability to reach out and strengthen our social systems. I just love how every single one of these principles we can find biblically. And I know that you have a free gift for our listeners today called Scriptures to Help You Live a Healthy Lifestyle. Tell us a little bit about what people will get when they sign up for your free gift.
So it's just scriptures that you can relate to. Some of the ones that we mentioned here, some are not. And it just can start you out with verses that you can memorize and actually use that for meditation during your quiet time. I usually recommend people recite these verses when they're like doing their walk during lunch, or some type of leisurely activity, so you can get both the physical and the mental health going, and the spiritual connection, and it just does wonders to decrease your stress management overall. So just a jump start to get you going with your scriptures to help with the physical health.
Oh, I love that. And I want to say thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing with us. Before we wrap this up, do you have any specific like words of wisdom, a last thought that you want to leave with people to take away? What would be something that would be really helpful for them?
So I always just like to say, remember that your body is a temple. I know we said that already, but if you remember that, you're more likely to carry out what you have for God, your purpose for life. And that if you carry out your purpose, it will help me, it will help everyone else in the community. You are here for a purpose, and we need you to carry out your God-given purpose. So please, please, please take care of your physical health so you can actually carry out your spiritual purpose.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adkins. I just really, really appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with us here today. And as always, I want to remind you to remember that health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. Thank you for being with us here today.